This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto, Knuckles OX, Jelpy, and Baba Snake. Now forced to watch on the other side, as someone suffers having their own misdeeds and evil turned into a bomb inside them, Bardock internally cheers for Raditz to hold strong, and actually finds himself praying his oldest will be okay. And as if answered by a dragon, his wish is revealed to have come true merely a moment later, where the scrappy brat who had been blasted full force and knocked to the ground stirs, and slowly climbs back up from the arena floor, remaining on his feet by sheer force of will in the aftermath of the magical blast. Just as Bardock once managed to do, the stadium falls under a hushed silence. And from a glance, it is plain to see that in this moment, Son Gojo could be felled by a stray gust of wind, much less a fighter on Spike's level, with it being equally obvious that this insolent brat is clinging onto consciousness by mere threats. Seeing this, despite his having subconsciously held back on the boy, Spike is once again infuriated by someone enduring his ultimate and signature technique, and prepares to fire off much more than a perfected devil might like this time around. But before he does, his curiosity sees him indulge in asking why the little imp is fighting so hard for the honor of a coward, as his hands glow with his satanic peak energy once more. But Raditz maintaining his bravado, even with his voice barely audible above a whisper, thanks to all the damage his lungs and throat have received, admits that it ain't just about defending his master, but also showing his mom, dad, Kakarot, Granola, Muesli, and everyone else that he's a brave warrior now, meaning he can't run away from the strongest guy that Bardock's fought on this planet. And so, with his heart reluctantly moved by the boy's heroic spirit, Spike decides to release his attack, and instead catch the brat just before he passes out and hits the ground, steadying him while looking over to the tournament announcer in order to declare his own forfeit in a shocking turn of events. He then turns back to Son Gojo and tells him despite his nature and dark origin, he has a passionate heart, and thus he too can be a hero, before he begins reaching into his suit to produce something Lord Kami had gifted him in case his original confrontation with Bardock went badly. And though he certainly wouldn't mind it himself after that fight, the boy needs it more. Thus, he bestows his senzu bean onto Raditz. That isn't to say anyone is particularly comfortable with the strange looking act, but before anyone can put a stop to it, Devilman is already encouraging Gojo to eat and go forth to accomplish his goal. This grants Raditz an immediate recovery, and much more. While Spike releases the boy to stand on his own, he fixes Bardock with a harsh glare that clearly says, despite my letting you off easy, this ain't over. Before subsequently, he turns his back on everyone and leaves the ring by flight, evidently satisfied enough with his heroics, if that's what you like to call it. Bardock behind his guise has mixed feelings about this. These fights in the tournament as a whole so far will certainly result in growth for all his boys, whether through harsh experiences like defeat or via Zenkai boost. But he's also now well aware that Devilman was definitely holding back there, which is counterproductive to this whole charade. And what's worse, if the pervert is really still planning to come after him, it could be troublesome this time around without Kami holding his reins. But this is an issue for later, as whether his oldest boy knows it or not, this is now not only the finals of the Earth's 19th Tenkaichi Budokai, but also an official Saiyan proving match between father and son. Unfortunately, with Devilman's impromptu departure, a small intermission has been called to make sure contestant Gojo really is good to go on further, as well as for vendors to fill time for setup and preparation for the finals, meaning more downtime for Bardock's family to confer and find answers to certain lingering questions, an opportunity some will capitalize on, as during this time, Raditz makes his way over to the portion of the spectators area that his friends and family are occupying, mostly for the sake of questioning Bulma, Kakarot, and Granola on how exactly he won against Devilman, as in all honesty, he passed out on his feet somewhere along the way, and missed the rest, with Granola all too happy to fill him in on all the gruesome details of what Devilman did. Meanwhile, Bardock finds that he is not alone in his secluded section of the competitor's waiting area, as Muesli, who by now is sure enough in her suspicions to approach the masked fighter, makes her way over to confirm them, and admonish him in his rough handling of poor Kakarot, finding it a bit easier to sneak up on him with his mind so preoccupied, on top of the fact that it seems Guine's is the main gaze he wishes to avoid, and so from his blind spot, she confidently levels a finger at the back of the stranger's head, and asks what his deal is exactly, as her free hand holds some dango she'd been snacking on. Unprepared for his acting skills to be so fiercely and closely tested by his house guest, Bardock is faced with a choice of doubling down or trusting and confiding in Muesli, who will no doubt run back to Guine to explain what he's doing for him, and he really had no desire to hear the usual prattle about him being so insane-like. Grunting that the woman is always such a pain in his ass as he does so, Bardock removes his mask to confirm the swirling suspicions, and even lets her in on how he's been pulling off this little charade, though this mostly earns him a look of disgust when she figures out he's basically drinking a solution strong enough to slough the skin off a human, just so he can better hide his identity and have a stiff drink at the same time. Though as this is not her biggest concern, Muesli instead asks what she and Guine want to know most. Why exactly is Bardock doing this? To this end, he somewhat awkwardly regurgitates the concepts and lessons Master Roshi and Grandpa Gohan wanted him to teach each. But in this way, it only sounds like something he half believes in, since these aren't his own words. And though reluctantly touched by Bardock's faith in the commitments he's made to both herself and her son, Muesli skeptically asks if that devotion to the kid's growth is really why he's going to all this trouble, to which Bardock can really only respond that he thinks so. Before the discussion can continue any further, the intermission is brought to an end, and Bardock is called to return to the ring. Standing and pulling his mask back down, he leaves Muesli with a gruff, "See ya." But suddenly, she orders him to wait, while shoving her leftover food into his masked face, haughtily claiming he'll probably need the fuel, before huffing a crude goodbye back to him, as she finds herself actually hoping things turn out well for the Brute just this once, and subsequently sneaks back to rejoin the others and share the dirt she's gathered with Guine. After the spectacle these two fighters have put on, introductions are hardly needed for the crowd, and so before long, the two finalists are squared off and ready to begin the match. On the announcer's call, the two have an initial clash, where surprise surprise, Uncle Bryce is super powerful, just like Bardock. Actually, exactly like Bardock, pushing Raditz to the absolute limits of his cunning, skill, and strength to contend against him, and all from the outset. No goofing off, slow warming up, or feeling the opponent out here. Even the sense of euphoria and zeal his Zenkai boost gave him quickly begins to amount to very little, though none of these things individually allow him to contend against Bryce Lieu, as all the power he's relied on during his training is now useless against this semi-wall standing tall. This feeling of futility is one Raditz hadn't really dealt with for a long time now, at least since Bardock made his change of heart once returning home, and then especially since the arrival of Granola and his tenure at the Satan Dojo. Since then, it's constantly felt like he could truly hold his head high as one of the strongest beings on this earth, all regardless of how hard he trains. With this stark enforcement that this is not the case being a sobering and humbling return to form that forces Raditz to wager on other advantages and skills he usually wouldn't consider, like his smaller size compared to the enemy and his stamina. But even these tools are seemingly meaningless as Bryce Lieu continues to coldly and dispassionately counter and negate all his attacks, as if it is a dull chore. And as that stamina begins to run dry, Raditz quickly finds himself coming to only one possible conclusion of the battle: utter defeat. However, instead of actually eliminating or incapacitating Raditz, Bryce reveals his entire reason for being here to his nephew, putting on some extra bravado himself to try and sell this charade more than ever, as he admits that he's only wasting his time here playing with these weaklings because Bardock asked him to. So as of right now, this match won't be ending until his nephew entertains him and makes things worth his time. As this sounds almost like something he himself would say, Raditz is taken aback by this declaration, mustering up the courage and energy to ask what happens if he can't do that, with Bardock bluntly saying he'll do something much worse than make Raditz the runner-up of a championship to some mudball planet. This causes Raditz to suddenly go pale and gulp in fear, not sensing even a bit of false resolution in that threat. No, guarantee. As he does, the masked fighter looks over and asks the announcer if they have an actual time limit, his tone suggesting that the answer better be no. Having seen just what these fighters are capable of, the announcer acquiesces, with Bardock almost audibly smirking that he thought so behind his mask, before then turning back to Raditz and informing him they have all the time in the world, his implication undeniably sinister. To this end, when it is clear he needs it, Bryce Lieu even allows Raditz to take a break and even be brought food by his family, merely waiting, sitting, and quietly sipping on his sake, while also putting away some bowls of rice that he's offered by the tournament staff beneath his mask as his own meal. After the strange dinner, the masked fighter stays true to his word and goes even further beyond in his unorthodox pursuit for an entertaining challenge, promising not to attack his nephew in his sleep, in the interest of giving him the proper rest and chance to come at him even smarter and stronger tomorrow. At this point, most rational spectators see fit to call it a day themselves and proceed home for the night, as there are already plans to sell tickets to a second day of the tournament event surprisingly. Being a naturally sneaky one, Raditz does try to attack Bryce during the respite, but this proves to be a major mistake, as the sneak attack is merely a cheap shot that the drunken Saiyan is easily able to deflect and punish as he nearly flings Raditz out of the ring before rolling right back over to go to sleep once again, with the bratty Brainiac thankfully skidding to a halt just for a disastrous loss like Kakarot, as he glances back to see the tournament officials are indeed still awake and monitoring the prolonged battle. This at last sees him begrudgingly give in to his exhaustion and capitalize on this chance to rest up. Many hours later, after Raditz sleeps in and basically allows tailgaters to show back up for an extra unplanned day of battle, the match starts once again to similar effect. This process turned pattern repeating again for a total of 5 days, with Raditz trying just about everything he can. It even turns to convening with his friends and family to help strategize despite his inability to read the ring. He of course has also used every dirty trick he can think of, from Kakarot's suggestion of biting to Granola's of going for the opponent's tail in a feint to target a different weak point. though this too yields no dice, only paying the hands of swift and unforgiving counterattacks, as the masked man evidently does not appreciate being bitten again. In fact, making this loudly known to little Son Goku as he continues to fight his older brother. One day is less cloudy than the rest, and so with the sun beaming down harshly, Raditz plots to position his way to fight in front of the likes of Master Roshi, Grandpa Gohan, and Granola's three-eyed teammate just before high noon, upon which he uses the burst of air to blow the caps off the latter two ball tournament attendants, exposing their extremely clean-shaven heads to the extremely bright light, and thus setting off a solar flare just as he dodges out of Bryce Lieu's way, blinding him and leaving him wide open for a flurry of attacks. Seeing a chance for victory, he winds up and loudly declares the Dynamite Monday to ring him out, only for the rushing barrage of powerful strikes to all be caught by the supposedly blinded warrior, thanks to Ki Sense, which Raditz laments his having not thought of as he's doubled over by a strong blow to the gut, nearly strong enough to ring him out alone. At least if Bryce Lieu weren't nice, or sadistic enough to speed in front of him before he falls out of the ring so he can bounce him back to the arena floor unceremoniously, putting an end to that day's attempts. His next sneaky trick launched during a rainy day is about as, if not less effective, since he decides to still go for it today despite the bad conditions. A bad decision, considering he miscalculates the effect the wet stage will have on his grounded fighting, and so he finds himself either nearly slipping or at risk of being knocked out of bounds from high on up, quite painfully at every turn, thanks to the opponent being a more flight experienced warrior, who holds an advantage in the air as well. In the end, this sees Raditz once again saved by the mysterious Saiyan, who is just as quick to punish these attempts to overcome him as he is to show leniency, and give Raditz more time to prove himself. By now, most regular Earthlings who aren't either friends of the family or hardcore martial arts enthusiasts have begun to lose interest as the match has gone on for so long, with the story remaining in the news for a bit and some spectators definitely returning. But on these rainy days are the ones where the fighters are resting up, the turnout is a lot lighter. However, no matter how long and how diligently Raditz chops away at this opponent, he does not yield. Not even when he eschews the breaks and the dinners and the rest times and simply tries to hammer away and keep attacking until he can't any longer. Though still, the proving match continues on, until Raditz is forced to question what he's trying to prove exactly, as neither he nor his mom have ever heard of one done anything like this. And beyond this, as time rolls on and his support from the crowd wanes, Raditz's resolve also begins to shake little by little, with him having to admit to himself that some of these dumb plans have been attempts to get himself wrung out, just so he can end this Sisyphean effort. But as that's either not in line with the Bryce Lieu's plan, or at the very least not entertaining enough, Raditz is constantly denied the easy way out as well. Eventually though, while keeping track of how much time exactly has passed, he suddenly realizes what day in the month he is on by the end of the 6th day, and if his count was correct, May 14th was supposed to be. Thus, he hatches one more dastardly scheme, deciding to go ahead and push on into the 7th day in order to achieve his one objective. On this day, as soon as he gets a chance to, Raditz repeats his all-out stamina-burning assault on Bryce Lieu, fighting desperately and without any sense of honor or respect for the relatively kind Saiyan, in turn being treated as such, as Bryce Lieu's counterattacks become much more cruel and punishing. But still, the Saiyan boy doggedly pursues his ambition, until eventually he finds himself in that oh-so-low position of Saiyan dominance, as he's pinned underfoot to look up at his better and the sky above. Sighing, Bryce Lieu admits that he'd hoped the boy was better than this, while increasing the pressure on his chest, adding this is quite boring, while Raditz chuckles and coughs with faith in his capacity to achieve great power and overcome this challenge, pushing that resolve into a mouth fired off by his booming shout, which clips the Masked Saiyan's face, knocking his head back, but only succeeding in chipping the mask to reveal the glaring eye of his supposed uncle. While behind him, as night begins to fall, Raditz's plan falls into motion, along with the full moon as it begins to rise, just as Bryce Lieu reveals he knows exactly what Raditz is doing. More than a bit surprised at his plan being ruined before it's even set in motion, Raditz questioned why he didn't stop him then, or better yet, use the moon himself. But Bryce, on top of simply citing his lack of need for such a thing against such a small fry, decides he may as well get preachy with this whole lesson thing. Since he's behind a false identity, he can get away with giving a dad talk. And so, he not only confirms, but encourages Raditz's awareness of and desire to surpass the always hypothetical someone out there like Frieza, someone stronger than him, with Bardock even speculating about all the figures out there that even that wretched emperor might fear, like King Cold himself, or the legendary Super Saiyan. But beyond that, it's not just about Raditz and the pursuit of his strength. After all, what about all the damage he'd do as an Uzaru? How many of the people he was just so happy were screaming his name does he think he'd reduce to a pace underfoot in his rampage for a simple win? This proving match isn't about him showing his pride nor his power. He wants to see the boy be smart enough to pick and choose his battles, to know when to grin and bear great pain and humiliation, like he did against the Devilman in pursuit of a higher purpose. Raditz is a really smart boy, especially for a Saiyan with an ego as big as his backed up by that intelligence. intelligence, but some caution would do the brat good. Raditz still seems hesitant about giving up, now able to just see the edges of the moon pinking between his uncle's hair. In fact, he's even able to just barely feel the power of Bluxways beginning to radiate into him with replenishing force. But as if reading his mind, Bryce Lieu just as quickly gives him another question to think of. What price will those twisted up lizards ask him to pay in order to undo his own mess? The echo of the number Frieza's death would cost as in terms of human life rings through Raditz's head, and suddenly, he is sickened to it all be likened to his former oppressor. And whether a machination of fate or Bardock's will, it is in this moment Raditz finally awakens to a sense of the key and life force around him, sensing all the people around them, with power levels big and small, from his family to whatever insane rando stuck around for a tournament this drawn out. This widening of his scope and perspective is just the catalyst to make Raditz finally realize he didn't want to be stronger the same way the Frieza Force was. And if that means no longer measuring his power and the death and destruction he can cause, then so be it. And so, he shuts his eyes and turns away from the moon with a smile, and forfeits, with it this time being finally accepted by the Mad Saiyan, who congratulates Raditz for being strong of body, mind, and spirit, resulting in Bryce Lieu being named the champion of the 19th Tenkaichi Budokai, while Raditz is recognized as the one to have truly won, simply through having gone the distance, but also by choosing to from now on embrace and protect this planet that harbors him genuinely. After this, Bardock of course rushes off to change out of his Bryce Lieu persona, and dodge the media in any further interviews, with Gine, Muesli, and Gohan covering for him rather well considering he's not come to see either Raditz or this mysterious brother of his also living on Earth for a whole week. Like, come on, how long was that shift? When he makes it back, however, there is of course more than a small bit of dressing down for from the likes of Gine and Raditz over the state of Goku's tail and his attendance respectively. During the festivities, as the various schools are departing, there is already rumors and news that the 20th tournament is actually planned to take place 3 years from now instead of 5, as a result of all the buzz this one had caused no less. And so Tao and Mr. Satan are eager to begin preparations for it, expressing positive but motivated attitudes about the improvements they need to make before it's time to face off again. Though Roshi makes the suggestion that Tao is already in agreement with, sending their older students like Yamcha, Tien, Granola, and Raditz out on global pilgrimages to improve themselves on their own and allow them some room to consider how they wish to grow as martial artists. Bardock too pretty quickly agrees to this, wanting more time with the kids out of the house, since Muesli the freeloader as he calls her when attempting to be nice these days has taken a particularly sadistic glee in innocently ruining most of his and Gine's opportunities to be truly intimate. The increased tension of course not helping all too much with the other weird tension between the two of them that wasn't really seeming to fade even after all this time and even training together. Though on the bright side, it did keep him pretty focused on his own training, which in turn, he'll turn Gine out, and now all 3 of the boys. So in the end, he'd call it a win. A bit miffed that he isn't allowed to go on a globe-trotting journey on his own just yet, Goku complains that on top of losing his tail, this tournament was pretty brutal on him, though both Roshi and Bardock question why he never flew home in all that time, considering how close it is if he was really that homesick, neither evidently caring all that much if he was a bit selfish or underhanded from time to time, despite their criticisms of each other while engaging in the same thing. Goku, though, reveals that he hasn't truly mastered flight just yet, so for now, Roshi decides to gift him the Kinto-un, even though Bardock chastises a toy like that as an unnecessary crutch, when he's already in the process of trying to get his youngest more disciplined. Though hearing him gripe, Muesli and Gine rat on Bardock that he's missed the boys just as much as they have, if not more, though he just doesn't want to admit it, with him teasing on further how he spent so many mornings wrestling in the kitchen lamenting having nothing interesting to do for exercise, at least not anymore, in an attempt to get them to spar with him. Embarrassed by this, Bardock denies the accusation, citing that he always slipped going over to Ox's and Anna's apparently, since the big guy's been training that little firecracker kid of his, and his apparently godly position-filling wife is no slouch either, as Ox had mentioned that even she had chipped into little Chi-Chi's training. Gig and I did. He then chuckles that Chi-Chi may just be what he needs to get Kakarot to focus, with Gine and Muesli seeming pretty interested by this, since this is actually one of the first times they've heard of another Earthwoman becoming a notable fighter, so they just may have to go check that out. But in the end, Bardock still opens up his house for Goku, Raditz, and Granola to return to when they all need some time to relax in their own spaces. But if they're going to be too rowdy all the time, it's right back to full-time band status. The boys all happily agree to this deal with their dad, while the family and friends as a whole decide to celebrate Raditz's performance in the tournament by getting dinner together. But that's where we'll be leaving this story off for right now. That's the tournament arc wrapped up. I am going to go ahead and let you know now we're not exactly done with part 8 just yet. We might go ahead and move on to part 9 since it's going to be a bit of a change of pace, but I do have it planned out for part 8.5 to be very much like part 7.5, so be on the lookout for that. Of course, my usual shoutouts to Valerius, Via, and Mr. Negative for their old visuals, to those I may have done some brainstorming and script reviews with, as well as to you guys for watching the videos, and especially to those who support the tone directly. Our supporters of the day being Adam McClendon, Tay, Gerald Smith, Shao Pai, Pizza 15X, Cronus Farai, New Monkey King, Chris White, and Andre. Can't be said enough, thanks to these guys and all the other names scrolling across screen. What you guys do for the channel is actually vital, and I know myself and your fellow viewers really appreciate it. With that said, there is nothing left to do but to tell you to take care of yourselves and the world around you. Go beyond plus ultra as always, have a nice day, and I'll see you guys next time.